You are Locked On Hawks Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Hawks Postcast, your home for the best Atlanta Hawks talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me is NBA and college basketball analyst DeShaun Tate. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. And our Locked On Hawks Postcast is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So injuries aside, what else has you triggered about these Hawks? We'll discuss. And if you do what Neek and John Drew did, you might get the call too. We'll download on that. But first, let's talk takes on how the shorthanded Hawks came up just short again in a 100-96 loss to the Houston Rockets. And it's almost like deja vu because we saw this same close outcome, just an 8-point loss last night to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And this is kind of like the Groundhog Day that we don't want to see happen. But anyway, your take on this Hawks-Rockets game is 18 game minutes did the Hawks end.
Yeah, and I couldn't have said it better than what you did with just mentioning that about how it felt so similar to just yesterday. And not only that, but just sometimes the way that you lose and just always having to talk about the competitive nature of this team and playing all the way down to the wire and the identity, and all those things. I think kind of the disruptive part for the Atlanta Hawks in this situation was that turnaround time, which we've been talking about for what has to be years by now at this point, being that third quarter. When we start talking about, the third quarter and then half of the first half of the fourth quarter, I think that's what kind of did them in terms of, they got really stagnant within the offense, not really sharing the ball amongst one another on an elite level. Yes, they're still playing hard on the opposite side of the ball, but that is kind of where Houston started to kind of kick things into gear a little bit. You started seeing a little bit more of Jalen Green. How about our RP person for the night, likely going to be some guy that shares the same last name as me, so I know I don't love it.
I know that.
But DeShaun Tate. If only you knew every time I have to kind of, when I'm looking down, look up because I'm hearing DeShaun Tate and it sounded like DeShaun Tate. Anywho, right. But no, I mean, in a situation where you don't have the bigs that are currently out, like for Houston being Tari Eason, also being Jabari Smith, also being Steven Adams. Those are situations that typically the Hawks you would think would be able to take advantage, but you don't have their Clint Capella, you don't have your Jalen Johnson and so forth. So I think typically that is where guys like that kind of have the ability to be able to take advantage. You start going inside, playing inside out. But where I think the Atlanta Hawks kind of got away from a little bit was when we were so used to seeing Trae Young still continue to play somewhat cerebral and just like really relaxed and just kind of getting guys involved. It kind of looks like we've kind of gotten away from that a little bit more so than anything. What I've noticed was in that critical 18 minutes.
Yeah, and that is when that offense kind of stagnates and everybody's kind of standing around. You're not seeing that ball move from side to side as much as you should. And granted, that could be a little bit of him being kind of up and down out last night and just kind of trying to find his rhythm again. And I was listening to our girl Lauren Williams on one of the local radio shows today, and she was just talking about that trust factor. And I said, I couldn't agree with her more, because sometimes when you start having these situations where players are going down that you've now developed the chemistry with, like a Jalen Johnson, if you will, like a Clint Capella, Zaccharie Risacher just now coming back, Jalen Johnson out, and then you got to figure out how to play with a Keaton Wallace, how to play with a Beat Krejci. Sometimes that does kind of get your rhythm off, because now you have to reestablish or regain trust to be able to believe that those players are going to be in the spots where they're supposed to be at the appointed times within the game. And yeah, I got to agree with you. I thought to myself as I was listening to the third quarter, I said, oh my, here we go. He's getting out of hand, man. And it went so quickly, because it was like Hawks up 3, Hawks up 1, Rockets up 13. It felt like it went that quickly. And one of the things we're going to talk about in that second segment, but you got to mention it here just a little bit, is kind of the way that the Rockets kind of got back to themselves and what Ime Udoka's philosophy is, which is aggressive defense. And they really started to clamp down, but they also started to play a cleaner game of basketball at the offensive side. So you saw both of these teams come into the second half with a nasty number of turnovers. I mean, 18, 17 respectively. But then the Rockets only give away the ball 4 times. Hawks give it away 8 times. And this was just by the 3-minute and 51-second mark left in the third quarter. So that was what was concerning me the most. Like, yeah, and I know we're going to talk about it, but yeah, that was one of those things that was the separator or created separation in that third quarter. And for me, it was just what I said. 8 did the Hawks in. You just can't have 8 turnovers in a quarter and expect to win a game. It's probably not going to happen. And I was thinking to myself, you know, the third quarter was also, and those 8 turnovers versus 4 turnovers, that's where you kind of saw how the Houston Rockets had to kind of pull it, like dig it out of the mud.
Yeah.
They just played the Celtics last night and just beat them. And all of a sudden, they've got to fly down here for this makeup game from the, I don't want to call it snowmageddon because we actually did something good with it 2 weeks ago, but we'll call it the snowstorm. So both of these teams kind of got crunched because they were both traveling from 3 hours away, getting here at 3 a.m. in the morning. So it really was going to be a question of whose legs would kind of give out the soonest, or which team was going to figure out how to just get that final ounce to put it together, play a little bit more efficiently. And I felt like the Rockets figured that out in the third quarter, and they kept up just enough of that in the fourth quarter. But I really do think those 8 turnovers here and there almost made the Hawks have to play a perfect fourth quarter in order to walk away with this game. They almost did that.
Yeah.
But ultimately speaking, because I mean, in reality, you hold the Houston Rockets to 18 points, really any team in the association to 18 points, you're probably going to win that game. But unfortunately, that pesky third quarter and those 8 turnovers and all the points that the Rockets were able to score off those turnovers, that's the game. That's game.
Well, we're so used to talking about also the Atlanta Hawks and with the ways that they were able to come out with wins during that really hot time that they were, right? That stretch just before diving into the, in-season tournament and all that, is because they were able to outscore so many opponents with players off the bench who had fresh legs. Now those fresh legs have heavy legs because you don't have as many fresh legs to be able to go to. So I think that's something else that hurts. And I think that this was also a game where the Atlanta Hawks had the ability to maybe, especially with getting Trae back, also Larry Nance for what that was worth, although I do think that he's still kind of nursing that injury, and it's kind of showing with some of the passes that's been given to him, and he's kind of like got butterfingers. I think he's kind of thinking about his hand before the ball actually gets to him kind of thing. But that being said, I feel like that maybe Houston could have been a little bit vulnerable. I mean, thinking about what they're doing, coming into this game, they're on a 3-game win streak, 2 of those against a team that probably still has the best record in the NBA, being the Cleveland Cavaliers. So that's something they have in common with the Atlanta Hawks. And then coming off of a win on the road at Boston as well. So they're probably going to be, overly excited and what have you, looking at who's playing, who's in the starting lineup for the Atlanta Hawks, and maybe looking past them a little bit. I think that was something that I think Atlanta likely could have taken advantage of. But, nonetheless, I still believe that, the Atlanta Hawks still could have caught them in a situation where they were maybe a little bit vulnerable, because while they do have some of the more experienced players like Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks, they have some youthful players too that can typically kind of make some bonehead decisions as well. And I think we saw that towards the conclusion of the game, where ultimately, unfortunately, it ends in a 3-point shot that kind of pinballs behind the backboard for DeAndre Hunter. Of course it does.
Yeah. And sidebar that has absolutely nothing to do with anything except what DeShaun just said about young players making bonehead plays. what the hell is the reason for Dylan Brooks? Anyway, I just had to get that out there because
Seriously.
Dylan Brooks is just, he's a special.
I feel like he's worse than Draymond Green. I mean, my Sparty aside, but I just feel like he makes Draymond Green look like a saint.
A saint. Right. I just had to touch on that one because that was also one of those sequences where and we don't on this show get into pointing fingers at referees, but let's just keep it real. In those last couple of minutes, there was some calls that didn't go in the Hawks' favor, and that was kind of one of them with how egregious that was. You call that a double technical? Miss me with that. But anyway, injuries aside, what else has you triggered about these Hawks? We'll talk about it in the and one. This episode of our Locked On Hawks postcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook, whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss. FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. So the live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. So download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. So, DeShaun, we already know when it comes to injuries, that is the topic that just won't go away because it's starting to be the infirmary, just like we talked about last night. Granted, Trae Young came back from right hamstring tightness. He was available tonight. Now, Bogey was actually out, Bogdan Bogdanovic, for personal reasons. Kobe Buffkin done for the season. Jalen Johnson, still a mystery. Officially, left shoulder injuries out. Just don't know the severity of the injury or the timeline that he's coming back. Got Zaccharie Risacher back, and that's starting to pay some dividends as well. But knowing that that is something that we're dealing with, that's an obvious concern. I think there may be, so we'll go to the second biggest concern. That could be anything. It could be 3-point woes. It could be turnovers. It could be free throws. And I'll give an aside from what you said just before break, and that is the depleted bench. Granted, it's a result of the injury, but a depleted bench nonetheless. So let's start with the 3-point woes. I mean, which of these is your second biggest concern, and tell me why?
I'm gonna go with the turnovers. Like I get it. You know, Trae is only one person. I know he's the primary ball handler and, you know, the guy who's responsible for the most part of ball protection and things of that nature. And I don't know. It's clear that he's not the only one. And a lot of times I feel like the guys are trying to overpass. I think that, you know, sometimes there's instances where, you know, the opposition has started to do their homework and kind of learn that, okay, I sense a trick play coming here. Like Trae is good. He's obviously really good, but there's too many instances where I feel like he's able to utilize his quick first step, get past the defender, okay, put them on his hip or behind him, and penetrate to the basket, and then either stop right there on the dime to try and get the bump and the foul, or indecisiveness between should I throw the lob? Meanwhile, he's in midair. Should I shoot? Should I throw the lob? Should I throw the lob? Should I shoot? And then it ends up being a deflection. He's not getting back on defense. Someone else is having to make up for that. And God forbid it's a young team like this Houston one or another one that likes to get up and down out in transition. And they've got an easy dunk on the other side. And I think that sometimes there's way too many instances of things like that. I've said it many times and I'll say it again. I'll always rather live on the side of taking an ill-advised, poor selection shot to give it a 50-50 chance at making or missing it before I just willy-nilly give the ball to the other team for them to have a chance to be able to score. So I think that's the one for me. All of them equally frustrating. But yeah, the turnovers is just one that kind of makes you put, your face into your hands, and it kind of leads to a different kind of frustration. And I also believe that it puts your teammates in position to where not only are they having to get back on defense for you a lot of times, but even more so, it kind of kills whatever kind of energy that, or I guess
any momentum,
any momentum that, thank
everything.
you very much, any kind of momentum that you may have just then beginning to kind of gather amongst one another. I think that's an energy killer more than anything, or faster than any of the other categories.
Yeah, and I think you make a great point about the fact that when you've got a team like the Houston Rockets that can take that turnover and turn it into points, where you had 18 turnovers, Hawks, and you conceded 23 points off those turnovers.
Sure.
And you look at the other team, and granted, the opponent had 21 turnovers tonight, but they only conceded 14 points. Yeah. So that kind of goes to that underbelly of, you got to get back on defense. And I guess that's when you do miss some of your key defenders like a Jalen Johnson or a Clint Capella to be able to at least stop the bleeding in that area. But yeah, you just feel like when this team has this kind of night with turnovers, and we've been seeing that uptick again, because we had that stretch where we totally did not see that kind of uptick.
Mm-hmm.
I think that ultimately that's something that can kind of dead you, especially in close games where you look back and you say, hey, 2 points given away here, 2 points given away there. And, it's a problem. So, yeah, I think definitely turnovers could be your second biggest concern. But I think for me, it's the 3-point woes. Okay. Like if we have one more game where this team is shooting below 30% or below 35% from three, that's a problem. I mean, that is something that keeps you in the play-in round, because you're going to have to, because you don't play defense consistently, or you're not great at defense, your best path to winning is outshooting the other team. You can't outshoot them if you can't shoot from deep.
Yeah,
23%. I mean, that's not sustainable if you want to consider yourself to be a team that's trying after 3 years to get out of the dungeon. 3-point percentage for the Rockets, granted, it was 23% as well, but they don't make their bread and butter with their threes. Their bread and butter is defense, and they did what they had to do defensively tonight, and that's how they came out with a win. We talked about this last night as it related to Bogey and the fact that him averaging 10 points, that's not enough. I mean, because that's essentially saying you giving me three 3-pointers. That's what I equate that to. You giving me 3 3-pointers on average every night. In what NBA is that going to be effective and satisfactory? The only thing that can offset it sometimes, or does offset it sometimes, is if Garrison Matthews has a Gary Bird night.
Sure. I was about to say that.
Yes, but if you don't have a Gary Bird night, and if you don't have a Bogey night, then where's your 3-point shot coming from? So to me, that's the thing. And hey, we said it before, we'll keep saying it until we get on the other side of the trade deadline. That's going to be something to think about. Are you going to go after a sharpshooter so that you can add that kind of depth to this team? And obviously it's going to be to the bench, which kind of goes into our bonus biggest concern, which is the bench. Because your starting five continues to be in, out, in, out, in, out, that means you're now, quote unquote, promoting guys like Vit Krejci to the starting lineup, or you're inserting here and there DeAndre Hunter to the starting lineup. We've even seen Keaton Wallace come to the starting lineup. So when those guys move into that starting five and Onyeka Okongwu, where's your bench? And then your bench is depleted by injuries, or maybe you've called up as many times as you can call up from the G League and you don't have anything else. So I think that's another thing that concerns me, the fact that the bench is being depleted so much as a result of that injury bug, and how the bench is depleted because we don't have the resources to be able to tackle the 3-point woes.
And I think that there's a couple things. I mean, one guy that you forgot about to mention, talking about mixing up the starting lineup and the different rotations. How about the guy that we barely ever get a chance to see on an NBA floor in an Atlanta Hawks uniform, that I've been dying to get into Atlanta Hawks uniform just in general, off the bench or not? he ends up starting on tonight, and that's Muhammad Gay. So, I mean, there's just so many different, like I mentioned on yesterday, and it feels like a never-ending revolving door, right? Where, you have a situation where, I think we've seen Garrison Matthews, he looks like he's on when he's on, but when he's not, he's clearly not. Risacher has had some moments where he looked really good and almost like, put together a stretch of games. But then all of a sudden it was like, okay, this is the rookie wall that people talk about that sometimes you can end up hitting. DeAndre Hunter has been atrocious from three, maybe not from the game on last night where he shot 50% from three. But if you go and look at the last two handfuls of games, he has been really bad. By the way, just to prep you for that, in case you want to go back and do some homework, one of those games he went 0% and he put up 9 threes. So, I think that, in instances like this, and Trae, by the way, is not always the most efficient 3-point shooter either. So, when you have situations like these, it just kind of makes it that much more frustrating, I guess. I really hope that we get some answers soon, because ultimately what this is, and a lot of people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to say it. I'm always willing to wake it up, because let's keep the same energy. It feels like the Hawks peaked early. Now I give them a little bit of grace and benefit of the doubt, because a lot of it is clear that it's due to injuries, right? But it just feels like they peaked early in the season, and they're clearly on a decline. I don't think this year we've had conversations yet about a 6-game losing streak. This is the first time that we've had that conversation. So it's definitely not one that we love talking about, but definitely have to stare it in the face and try and focus on not only getting healthy, but if guys ain't doing nothing else, they are passing the ball with every single pass needs to be with 2 hands going forward. They need to be practicing that and doing nothing but shooting threes in their dreams tonight.
Indeed. And we would be remiss if on this show we didn't talk about our favorite topic of what absolutely bothers DeShaun and I to no end, and that is, you get the free throw. It's just what it's called, free. So go ahead and get the free points, because again, when you shoot 83% from the free throw line and you lose by 4 points, that tells the story all by itself. So becoming the third Hawk to total over 400 points, 100 rebounds, 40 assists, 30 steals, and 20 blocks in your first 40 career outings, you might get the call too. We'll talk about it in Who Got Next. So we are talking about none other than the number 1 overall pick, the rookie Zaccharie Risacher. He was named to the NBA All-Star Rising Stars team today, joining Trae Young and DeAndre Hunter as the Hawks' 3 active players to make that squad. But with players being selected by assistant coaches around the association, DeShaun, what does that say to you about Zach being recognized for coming into his own already?
Some of this is really going to come off as if it's like, all right, they had to you can't leave the number 1 pick off of the list, right? He has to play. But like, I feel like that,
you can, because some of them are busts. Some of them don't look like number 1 picks at this point.
That is true. So, and it's going to be real hard in your first couple months of the NBA to be a number 1 pick and you don't at least get invited to Rising Stars Challenge. Nonetheless, Rising Stars game. But nonetheless, I think that it's good for him. I think it's good for, obviously for the city of Atlanta and all the good and cool, cute stuff that you're kind of like supposed to say to whatever degree. But I still think that it's good for him, because this is a part of the NBA. This is a part of where you learn about the NBA culture, and you learn so much about how, the close, community that the NBA is amongst its players and families and all that kind of stuff. It's your one opportunity during the season to kind of have a little bit of fun for a weekend or what have you, and get into some trouble for some other people, but to have a little bit of fun at the same time. So for Zaccharie Risacher, and it's not like he hasn't been a guy that's productive. You just ran off the 400 by 100 by 40 by 30 by 20.
Yes.
Only 3 players in Hawks history to have done that. I think that that's good. And there's we talked about the rookie wall. There's going to be some struggles. We all know that, and putting on the weight and everything else. But I think just as cerebral he is, and just the way he brings that international IQ over to this side, I think that it's good that we've been able to see him do some of the little things that he has, because some of those little things has turned into big things, and it's nice that the NBA is kind of taking notice to that.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way to put that. The little things as he's starting to do, the things, the details, because sometimes the devil is in the details, especially as you're trying to get this game to slow down and, like you said, learn the difference in the game in America versus the game internationally. And I think we've seen him grow, and it's been pretty exciting, right? It's been good to see him grow. And again, we know that obviously the left adductor has been kind of a challenge. So he was out tonight just for load management purposes. But other than that, when he came back, I think it was last night when he came back, he had a nice game. So I think for him, as long as he can stay healthy, he's a good cog in the wheel. He gives the Hawks some encouragement, we'll say, for what the front court can be for going forward. Yeah. So I feel at least comfortable that he's giving them something that is sustainable, right? So congratulations to Zaccharie Risacher for getting the nod. I look forward to seeing what he's going to do amongst the rising stars there, because of course it's picked up from the rookie class and the sophomore class. So we'll get to see the two Frenchmen potentially take the court with Victor Wembanyama and Zaccharie Risacher. But one of the mysteries for the next 24 or less hours, we're talking about who's going to San Fran. We know Zaccharie is going, but the question becomes, when the NBA announces all-star reserves tomorrow, does Trae Young get the nod?
Yeah, I know. It's one of those things, Tenitra, where I'm almost, I think we mentioned this some weeks ago when we were having this conversation. I almost want them to snub him again so that he can get PO and then all of a sudden go on this tear that he tends to go on, that sometimes it feels like he doesn't really go on unless people completely disrespect him. I like to see that energy all the time, but that is his motivation. That's his, he's determined. He's just wired that way. I ultimately do think that he will get the nod. But I think that there are definitely some other people that are certainly worth, considering. But some of the stuff that he's done this year, especially in the earlier parts before all of the injuries to the other guys and what have you, I think it's going to be really hard to leave a player like that off the list, especially one that has been leading in assists the entire way, and not talking only about that, but also the scoring load that he also has to carry. Not saying he's the whole team, but the scoring load that he does have to carry for this team to be able to do both, I think is going to be really hard in the East amongst guards to keep him off.
Yeah. And I think in addition to that, the commitment, call it what you want. We are not saying that he is going to be a defensive juggernaut. All we're saying is that the effort is there and you're starting to see results here and there. I think I heard a couple nights back, a couple games ago, Trae Young on the block, and I was like, block.
So I'm like, he ain't at. I wouldn't even been thinking about down in the paint. I would have been like, he ain't at the game. What is Trae doing on the block? I'm thinking on the block, on the block. I'm not thinking about in the paint.
No, because we don't think about him in those terms. But when I hear that, it makes me smile, because I'm saying, you know what? I got this term, this phrase, a little scrappy. And that's for anybody, not just Trae Young. When you're down there clawing and scraping in any area of life and you're just trying to make it happen, look, you cannot down him. You cannot do anything but give him love for that kind of effort and that kind of support that he's providing to the rest of his team defensively. But hey, they're going to need him, them, and all y'all in this 3-game road trip, because tomorrow they play Cleveland. And just to check what we said earlier, they're actually now second in the association, because the Oklahoma City Thunder have taken over the first spot, but the Cavs are still number 1 in the East. And I am sure they are looking at the fact that there were 2 box scores that didn't have them in the win column. So I know that they are hoping and that they can give a little payback tomorrow. But what do the Hawks need to do to get the series sweep against the Cavs and finally just end this losing streak?
Yeah, I know the Cavs are going to be looking forward to it. Let me just say this
Oh,
real
yeah.
quick. I promise I won't be long-winded. Is that how about that for the Atlanta Hawks, where they're not only getting ready to play the team with the best record or second best record now in the
Mhm.
NBA, but they just finished playing against the team with the third best record in the NBA. I think that
Yeah.
is the Houston Rockets. As ironic and coincidental as that is with all the injuries. Anywho, um, it's all about the ball security, like we said before. Like, I think you have to start there. It is the
Mhm.
three things. Like, we don't have to try to dumb this down and treat it like we're curing cancer or anything to try and figure this thing out. It's the three things that we're talking about. It's the free throw shooting, it's the ball protection, and it's being able to, be able to shoot a decent amount from three. I think if they
Yeah.
go in there and they can shoot somewhere right around, maybe at worst, or somewhere relatively around like a 38%, somewhere up in that range from
Mhm.
three, and play some really good defense. I mean, think about it. Houston is a really a team that has done well they're number one in rebounding. The Atlanta Hawks did well
Yep.
against them in that department tonight,
Mhm.
and they can score the basketball. These last two games, the Hawks have kept teams to only scoring 100 points. I know that
Right.
sounds
Right.
like a lot, but this isn't the
No,
90s.
not in this
Teams
league.
are averaging 120 something points a night.
Exactly.
So I think that does kind of speak some volume. Put the defense with being able to put some realistic efforts to those other three categories that we talked about on top of that defense. And I think that would be the best way to give themselves a chance.
Yeah, I think they better get hot from that 3-point line, because one of the reasons they were able to blow the Cavs out in that first game is because they shot like 40. It was something crazy. They shot like 47, almost 48% from the 3-point line. And then also, again, in that second game where they pretty much blew them out again, they
Sure.
shot over 40% from the 3-point line. So somebody better get hot from deep if they want to take these Cleveland Cavaliers down for a third and final time this season. Locked On Sports Atlanta is the number one place to hang out after every game. Remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And for more on the Hawks, check out Locked On Hawks with our guy, Brad Rowland. We'll see you next time.